This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're on the air with Karissa. We're Karissa Dean. We got KarissaDean.com. And you're a trailblazer on transformation. And I want to welcome you to the Family Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm good, Phantom. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Want to let people know that we are a podcast on the Newsly Network. You can see that code below. There's a little scrolling thing with the coupon code. You check out that coupon code of Ghost, and you can listen to us on Newsly later tonight, and that's free for anybody who uses that code. They can check us out on that platform. They are sponsors, that we have mentioned them. Other than that, we always ask a couple questions before we get into your story. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Great question. I think what motivates me is the transformation I made in my own life is the motivator behind my business, my life, the way I want to show up in the world, because change is why I'm still here on Earth. And I'm super thankful for that. And I want to share that story with other people so they're inspired to stay here as well.
So, how did you get into being a business mentor or coach?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'll condense it for your audience. So, in 2019, I was a substitute teacher for Portland Public Schools. I was a mom, I was a wife, and my husband and I had been purchasing and I had been managing properties for kind of later in life retirement. And I was burnt out. I was overworked. I was overstimulated. I was tired. And I absolutely was not living life in my purpose. And so I was pretty much miserable and angry, and I hated everything. And I decided, I got to invest in myself. So coaching kind of landed in my lap. And through coaching, I discovered I'm actually really an entrepreneur. I really like business. I'm really good at business. And it kind of just spiraled from there. And throughout, my time in rediscovering who I am and my values and kind of getting myself back to a more regulated way of living, I realized that I wanted to teach other women or individuals that they too can change directions, choose themselves, and redefine, life and make it really exciting and beautiful for them.
I think it's really interesting when people kind of come to their like their looking glass self, and then they realize their own truth.
Yeah.
And I always kind of refer to like Victorian ideas like looking glass self because I'm an
Yeah.
artist. But the idea, the introspection, like you can't usually help other people unless you've done that kind of work yourself
100%. Yep.
to identify like, oh, why am I not happy?
Right.
Yeah, like, oh, I did all the things I ticked off the checklist, and I'm not happy. Like, I've talked to like doctors, surgeons, and they're not happy. They weren't happy doing what they were doing because they thought that was their life purpose, but they actually had another purpose. So
Exactly.
sometimes like you have to. It's a hard truth to come to something when you're actually looking at yourself and you're going to work and you're like you don't feel it. Like,
Yeah.
or you feel it too much, and it's like this is not where I want to be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that if you're numb to life, or if you're not like now, the reference point is it's a Monday for me here. I'm in Oregon, and I'm excited to wake up. I'm excited to get ready for work. I'm excited to do the work, and I think that that's available to you if you're doing what you're meant to do and you're in your purpose.
Yeah, I think you just have to give yourself the permission structure because some people like, or they're people pleasers, or they got responsibility and say, "Well, I can't do that. That's too selfish,"
Right.
or that's not safe.
Right.
So a
Right.
lot of people they think it's like, "Well, I'm being selfish," or it's shameful to be interested in what I want. I should only do what's good for everyone else around me. And so then you have to give yourself that permission structure.
Yeah.
And do you find it's like that crucible moment that you got fed up? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah, I got fed up. I got to this breaking point, right? It was kind of like the fall to your knees am I going to stay on earth or not anymore? And I don't think it has to be that dramatic for people, but like you mentioned, you're numb to life, and you're not in your purpose, and you're not excited. And you mentioned being selfish. Well, I think it is the ultimate selfish act. But the thing about this that needs to have the perspective shift is it is selfish. It should be selfish. And if we actually got a little more selfish and we're curious about our path and our purpose, and we started living in that, the world would actually be a lot better of a place, because people who are living in their purpose and living in their passion are a lot happier.
Well, they're a lot more aligned,
they're a lot more
with the
aligned.
universe. So you think about the universe, like, I'm a Buddhist, and we feel like, wait, we all have a path. But sometimes we purposely deviate from our path for all kinds of reasons, and we're not where we actually are supposed to be.
Correct.
And it's kind of like an efficiency expert say, well, if people aren't at their most efficient or most productive state, like if you're phoning it in, you're probably the most efficient person. If you're able to actually be a creative or do what you're passionate about, you're bringing your A game like all the time.
Exactly.
Versus like somebody who's phoning it in. Well, everybody knows what happens when you phone it in. You make mistakes. Things are kind of mediocre. It's not exactly where it could be. So the whole planet, if people are more aligned, the outcomes would be better overall.
Absolutely. Yep, that's exactly it. It's all about figuring out who you are, and that is alignment.
Yeah, it's like frequency. Like as a musician, it's like we deal with like what we call noise, dissonance, discordance, and then harmony and melody.
Yeah.
Now, not every song is only melody. Some songs have build up, sometimes have space where there's nothing going on, or there's noise or discordance or something that's a little off. And sometimes like the whole picture has to have all the elements. There's like pillars.
Yeah.
And what some people don't realize is like you have permission to make mistakes. Like we call in the arts are like happy accidents. If people dread the actual happy accident because they're so scared of the feedback loop, or it's going to be terrible. Well, you can't bake a cake without breaking some eggs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think some of the most beautiful music or creative things that we have in this life were accidents, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the
it.
best stuff is a happy accident. And I think that is what we should be looking towards as motivation to just try.
Yeah, because I mean, safety is not always where the artist lives.
No.
Or creative folks live. Like you get the Steve Jobs and Wozniak. They're like, why not build something? I know IBM's already doing it. I know all these other companies are already doing it, but we could do it. Like, why? Because we got a different idea. And some people look at it and say, well, I can't. Like, if you're an author, it's like, well, there's already James Joyce. There's already, Shakespeare. I can never match that, so I can't. I don't have anything to say, which is not the truth, because every human being, your secret sauce is how you interpret the world, and how you interpret the world is not exactly how anybody else does. And so if you actually give voice to that, there's a place for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm always telling people, you have a unique voice, and the way that you're going to speak is going to touch someone differently than the way that I would speak, or that you would even speak. And it's so powerful, and we should all be doing our magic. We really all should.
Because the algorithms like to clone things. So we live in a world where like the next cat video is more likely with the song they tell you to use to get actual people engaged. But is that engagement actually productive? I would argue there are situations where the number of views don't equal the number of opportunities.
100%.
You could actually present something to the world, and the right person sees it because they're in the right frequency, and then you get an opportunity.
Yeah.
So you don't always have to. I was able to interview a Grammy award-winning producer because he saw a podcast that I put on like an Instagram, a reel, and it didn't get a lot of views. It only had maybe like 100 views, but he saw it and it spoke to him, and then I got to do that interview. So that doesn't
Amazing.
always tell you people like the tech bros want to tell you like you got to have this kind of engagement or you're a failure.
Right.
Because it's in their interest because they make money off
Exactly.
you paying for the ads and paying for this and paying for that. But it's like you have to understand, does something speak to you? Are you passionate about it? If you put it in the world, I think the law of attraction will allow things to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally believe in that. And I think, you know, there are people out there with a million followers who make no money off of it. And there's people like what you were saying who got 100 views off of something and had a great opportunity to, you know, to interview somebody who is super famous. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what you can do. I mean, you can end up talking to people that you don't think you're in their lane, and it's all kind of
Exactly.
about you. I mean, it's like if you start giving yourself permissions, like, oh, I'm not scared to talk to the CEO or talk to a film director or talk to this author or talk to an actor. You know,
Yeah.
like, why would you be scared? They're all human beings, right? So do you find something that you can relate to, even though people tend to put people on such pedestals
Yeah.
and then feel like, well, I can never match that. And then you don't even try because you don't even think you can be in the same zone.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's so true. I did a giant research on networking. And what I found was the people who went to networking events and didn't talk about business, right? Because you go to a networking thing and you think, okay, I'm here to talk business. The people who went and just were themselves, talked about their dog, talked about going kayaking, talked about their partner, talked about food, they actually made meaningful relationships that benefited their business. And the people who were there who introduced themselves, hi, I'm Mark and I sell insurance,
Like elevator
didn't
pitch.
yeah, they didn't benefit from the networking event. And so really what you're saying is the more human we are and the
Yeah.
more down to earth and relatable we allow ourselves to be, the more the universe is like, okay, they're in their authentic being, they're connected, they're tapped in, they're turned on. Let's make sure that they're receiving more so that they do more of it, right? And I think
Yeah.
that that's what's missing right now, I would say, with social media, with AI, is there's a lot of negative reinforcement around what's authentic and what's real, because some of the realness isn't as quote unquote likable.
Yeah. Well, there's a problem with some of these algorithms, like on job services. It's actually preventing human to human contact by
Yeah.
prejudging and looking for how many acronyms you have and how
Yeah.
many certifications you have. I want to say I've been in software industry for 25 years. And my first opportunity, I was able to get into a software house. And I'd only been working at an insurance company. I'd never been a business analyst. But they saw something in me in the interview that on my resume at the time I didn't have. I wasn't
Mm,
comp sci. I was a liberal arts major, political science and sociology. But when they
interesting.
talked to me, they realized that I could write research papers, that
Yeah.
I could do critical thinking. They looked at what I did. I had done a newspaper when I was in college. I had done all these, I'd led some organizations. And they said, well, the HR person was able to kind of theorize, I think this person could actually add value.
Yeah.
But when you have things that are just predating things
Right.
with all these computer things, it's like the computer is not always the answer.
No.
Like the logic is not always right.
Right.
And human beings, I'm going to trust a human being interaction, like you said,
Yeah.
that the guy's not just regurgitating their elevator pitch to 20 people.
Right.
They actually
Exactly.
feel like it's not an infomercial. It's a real thing.
Yeah, you're a real. I mean, I think that's, I went to Target for the first time last Friday. I went to Target for the first time. I haven't been to Target in forever.
Wow.
I hate going to the store. I really do. I'm not a shopper. And I go in and I was just baffled. There's nobody working. there's no humans anywhere, and everything is locked up. Like hairspray is locked up, Advil is locked up.
Not
And
very
I'm just
friendly.
like, and then we wonder, why we're feeling disconnected from each other. It's because we've taken out humanness, and the
Yeah.
humanness is the authenticity. Like, we are meant to live it together and to help each other and connect. And I think that is so sad to see, and I'm hoping that the next generation, that pendulum swings a little bit, because
Well, we gotta hope that the Silicon Valley bros are telling everybody that the automated McDonald's is the solution, when
oh
everybody really
man,
knows that if you're in LA, you want to go to the food truck,
yeah,
right? You want to go to the restaurant. Everybody on the street saying that's the restaurant. You don't want to go to the robotic
no,
fast food joint just because the tech people tell you that that's what sells, because they want to sell the robots,
right,
they want to sell the AI, and they
right,
want to sell the token fees. Like some guy told me, this tech bro told me, like, oh, all music and films are going to be done by AI, so we won't need a lot of artists. And I was like you're a tech bro, and that's in your interest because you get paid by the token. That
yeah,
is not something that I think any human being really wants to hear,
no,
because
I
the
hope
heart
not.
of a voice is the voice. It's not
Yep,
the circuitry. It's not the circuit board. That's
right,
not what people want.
right. Well, and I think the thing, to tie it back to like the authenticity and living in your purpose, it's feeling, right? And AI, as smart and helpful and beneficial as it can be, it can never encompass feelings. And that really is the driver for what makes you feel good, is how am I feeling? Because if you're not feeling well, that's when you know you need to take better care of yourself, you need to pivot, you need to make some habit changes. But when you're feeling really good, that high frequency, that law of attraction vibration, where you are going to receive so much beauty in your life because you're tapped into a higher frequency, and AI can never touch that. So
Yeah,
my
it's just
my
the
hope is
but
my
I
hope
mean the
is that
random.
lives.
Well, the random nature of your experience, because it's like subconscious, it's
Yeah.
external, it's internal. It's kind of the idea of artists can tap into this idea of a muse. The idea
Yeah.
of a muse is really like it's your subconscious and the external and whatever's kind of going on.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is your artistic ability, your 10,000 hours that makes you a writer, that makes you a painter, that makes you a musician, that makes you whatever you're doing. And so it's your way to discern things, and then it's
Mhm.
your secret sauce of like, how do you interpret that, right?
Yeah.
And people would say, like, I always say, give an example, like Stevie Ray Vaughan playing Voodoo Child versus Hendrix wrote it. Stevie Ray Vaughan is a Texas bluesman. Both of those songs, when you listen to them, they might appear to be the same, but they're not the same at all. The two
Right.
different interpretations, one guy wrote it and the other guy interpreted it, they're not note for note the same at all. They're different textures and different feelings and how it's done. And
Yep.
that's the nature of the blues. The blues has a structure, but everybody who goes into it, from Lead Belly to any of the great, bluesmen, they interpret the same pentatonic scale in different ways.
Yeah.
And so, AI could say, well, that's this. And it could actually give you something that's in that form, but it's never going to be what Lead Belly did, or Bo Diddley did, or Hendrix did, or what anybody else did
No.
going forward in the past or now. It's like it's never going to match a human being.
No.
It might approximate whatever it's in its machine library.
Yeah.
And if you're not discerning, you might think that that's art.
Right.
It's kind of like fast food art.
Yeah. I mean, oh man, I hope it doesn't get to that. And I think what makes people and humans so unique is the history. And so AI doesn't have the history, right? Like, when you listen to a musician, you can feel their pain, you can feel their joy,
Yeah,
especially if it's their own lyrics, right? Because that's their story and their expression of themselves. And I really, I don't think anyone can ever
think if you
tap
go see a
into that
play in
magic.
yeah, but you see a play in New York, like an off Broadway
Uh-huh.
play, and
Okay.
you could go see it every night, and then check the actor is actually maybe doing the same lines, but the way they do it every night is their artistic, that's their secret sauce. How
Yeah.
they feel in that, on that stage that night, based on what the audience is doing, what happened to them that day, what happened in the moment. It's like a flow state thing. And it's kind of like a painter
Yeah.
that puts down a brush stroke. It's like in the moment, it is what it is. And
Right.
it's like it's captured in that moment, and it's never going to be exactly the same.
No.
And that's what we can do, that as
Yeah.
humans. And that's the value that some people don't actually understand.
Yeah.
And and that's where people, you can give yourself the permission, because you don't have to clone Shakespeare. You
Right.
don't have to be Orson Welles. You don't have to be William Blake. You don't have to be Beyonce. You don't have to be Taylor Swift. You could be you.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that if more people gave themselves that permission to be selfish and to find out what their secret sauce is, I think the world would be a lot more inviting for people
Mhm.
to go out and experience.
It's really like a growth mindset, right? Or what would you call the
Mhm.
mindset?
Yeah, I would call it a growth mindset or a solution oriented mindset. Where you're just looking at life and you're like, how does it get better? I use the line with all of my clients. I mean, I use this line with everyone. It's like, get curious. How can you get
Mm,
more curious about this? And I think the moment your curiosity ends is the moment where your stagnation begins. And when we get stagnant in life, that's when our creative and artistic and inventive abilities die, because it's basically saying nothing's ever going to change. It's never going to get better. And so you stop living in those
mm,
moments. And I think that's why you have to keep getting curious, because it can always get better. There are multiple pathways, like you had mentioned, you're Buddhist. There's multiple ways of being here, and there's
mhm.
multiple pathways, and there's so many choices. And just because you saw it mirrored for you one way in your childhood or, in your adulthood, doesn't mean that there's not
Yeah,
different
multiple ways.
opportunities,
Yeah, I mean,
multiple
that's the
ways of
thing.
living.
That's the way we, and like in software design, I started, I'm a child of the '70s, started on mainframes, very structured, take a long time. Now we're living in the agile age where things are like blockchain, things are, more advanced. And we go with this idea of iterative development.
Yeah,
And basically, we don't know what we don't know. Right. And so
exactly.
we allow ourselves to have the point one, point two, point three, point four, point five. So we're never really done. And
No.
so when I first started to get a mainframe concept, you had to have this kind of waterfall idea. You had to know everything. You couldn't release it till you had everything, but we never really knew everything. And so we'd have
Yeah,
all kinds of bugs and all kinds of
yeah,
problems. Not that
yeah,
we don't have the bugs, but we're willing to at some point say, we're going to put it out and then we'll adapt it as we get more information. And
yeah,
and this is like knowing that technology is exponential. So I have to constantly learn new tech in the industry I'm in. I'm never kind of like, I know it all. I can never act like I know it all, because like, yeah, I might have been really good at COBOL, but
yeah.
COBOL's not the thing. Like the thing
Right,
is totally different. And I
right.
might not know everything about AI prompting that the
Yeah,
guys at OpenAI know. I
yeah,
learn as much as I can, but I know I don't know everything. And
right.
that's the first thing. But when you run into people who think they know everything, then that's like the danger side of red flags. It's like
Yeah,
there's no way you know everything. Right.
yeah,
So you might be very good,
yeah,
but you don't know everything. And
yeah,
you have to have that a little bit of humility and willingness to actually, you know, progress. And if you
yep.
think you're done, you're not done till you're out of here.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's that's a little bit of like the ego battling itself, because I think most people fall into that category because it's exhausting, right? Like you're probably exhausted of like always having to learn, always having to like, I mean, right? There are days where you're just kind of like, man, can it be the same
I
thing?
would like a
Because
baseline, but it's not the way things are.
it's just not the way things are. And that's been my experience ever since I got into the personal development world and coaching. It's like the learning never stops. Like life is constantly smacking me in the face with lessons, and then I'm meeting clients or new clients, and I'm able to be like, oh, that just happened to me. I got you. Let's talk about it. Because if you have that growth mindset and you're committed to the curiosity and, expanding yourself, right? When we know better, we get to do better. You will constantly be in a mode of learning. And
Yeah.
most people don't want to do that because it's exhausting.
Well,
Because it
it
is
could be a
work.
lot of anxiety because like people want to feel like they're the expert. They want to know they're the
Yep.
SME. They're the key person dependency. They want to know that they know everything. And yeah, okay, you could know somebody that's in business and they know this process backwards and forwards. But guess what? The company's not doing that process anymore. It's being re-engineered. And then that person who is that key person dependency then feels like, oh, I'm being thrown away.
Yeah.
Because they got locked into thinking that that's who they are.
Right.
Right. And instead of thinking like I've kind of lived my life bouncing around as a
Yeah.
consultant, never stayed anywhere. And my pop stayed as an insurance agent for 25 years.
Yeah.
He was comfortable doing that. And the world was like that. The
Right.
world's not exactly like that anymore. And
Right.
so we're on the cusp of this whole revolution where people need to have critical thinking, but our education system didn't really teach that.
Absolutely.
It taught people to be like agricultural and industrial workers, pushing the same button, showing up in the cube, having repeatable processes. And now
Yeah.
we're telling people that you've got to do what I'm doing all the time. And the anxiety level is going through the roof because like
Yep.
don't have the ability to run the logarithm, to run the algorithm, to run like, can you do this thing 5 different ways? Why make the argument of how you could do it? The
Yeah.
logic, the philosophical argument, Camus, Sartre, thinking.
Right.
Most people don't go to school and get into thinking.
No.
They go in, they get a certificate for a specific thing.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
they wonder why when that thing goes away, like they can't survive. Because
Right.
like you have to be able to think. You have to be able to learn how to learn.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the willingness to be wrong or the willingness to change. If we're unwilling, if we're like, this is how it's always been and we're going to keep doing it the same way because it's always been done that way, then you're never willing to be wrong, right? And so
Yeah.
you're just stuck in that cycle. And I think we're on the cusp of that revolution where you get to be wrong. And being wrong isn't bad anymore. It actually just means that you're learning and you're evolving and that you're trying something that you don't understand. And for me, when I'm listening to you share, it's about the trust of the self really is what we're talking about. If you trust yourself, then you're okay being wrong. When you feel safe in yourself, when you trust yourself, when I got me, I'm going to be able to manage whatever's coming my way, and you have that like grounded center, you can handle it. And the anxiety might be there, but it's not crippling anxiety. It's anxiety that's like, oh, I'm at my edge. I'm uncomfortable. I got to learn a little bit. I'm uncomfortable. This is a little bit challenging, but you trust that you can do it and you feel safe within yourself. And I think that's where we get a look at what's our trauma, what's our healing, and how do we shift our perspective to feel safe in our bodies, to learn how to trust ourselves so that we can live in our purpose, so that we don't become a hamster on a wheel and feel terrible and miserable for the rest of our life.
Can we get addicted to codependency, like whether it's a toxic like relationship or a toxic workplace or a toxic neighborhood, toxic, city, like
Family.
like there's all this microcosm. I learned in sociology, like family level and then societal level, right? Macrocosm. So microcosm, macrocosm, it's two-way street. And it's like if you can't get over the fact that you can have happy accidents instead you call it mistakes.
Right.
And then you don't like learning from your mistakes. So you never, like we have a thing where we have lessons learned.
Right.
At the end of every project. And we go through honest about what we did wrong and what we did right? And what we could do better. And a lot of people don't want to, first time you get into that, people don't want to talk. Nobody wants to put up the hand. Nobody wants to say that they're the one that made a mistake. They want to just talk about the things they did good.
Right.
But once you start being confident to actually point out where you actually had the errors, because they think they're going to get the bad performance review. They
Right.
think they're going to get nailed for, well, you're going to be responsible for that because you mentioned it. So now you own it. So now
Right.
you're going to get the hit.
Yeah.
So it's like the way we penalize people being honest. Like
Correct.
sometimes you're not rewarded for being as honest or open. And so society kind of puts a band-aid on it, puts the cover on it, and then
Yeah.
you don't learn anything
Right.
because you don't want to actually go into it.
Right.
And it's hard because sometimes you will pay a price. In some
Yeah.
organizations, you might pay a price, and that might lead you to another organization because it's like, oh, I'm not really meant to be here because they don't align.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say that's poor. That's honestly just poor leadership. I mean, I think as somebody who has employees and leads people, me owning my mistakes in front of my employees, and me saying, "Oh, you made a mistake. What'd you learn from that?" allows this level of vulnerability, and really that's what's missing is this vulnerability piece to be like, wow, you made a mistake. Maybe it cost the company $1,000, maybe it cost the company $100,000, but are you going to make that same mistake again? No, probably not. Okay, great, let's not make that same mistake again. And I think that's like that growth mindset in leadership is, as a leader, are you leading your team and your people, are you giving them permission to make mistakes so they can learn?
Hmm. Yeah, instead of trying to be perfect, like everybody's trying to do, everybody wants a surgeon to be perfect. We know that's super critical. But the
Right.
fact is, there's no way they can be because they got malpractice insurance for a reason.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So the idea is like, okay, that's like a very big bar. You can't make a mistake.
Right.
The NASA engineer. Well, you make
Right.
that mistake, the rocket's gonna blow up.
Right.
Right. So it's like, what is high stakes? Even when there's high
Absolutely.
stakes in engineering, you learn from the rocket blowing up.
Exactly.
You can't actually progress to the rocket that doesn't blow up unless you blow some up.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think some of the greatest things were birthed out of a lot of mistakes. I mean, we can look at Howard Hughes and all of his disastrous things that he tried to create. We can look at, Steve Jobs. We can look at, Bill Gates. We can look at some of these really influential people who created things that we wouldn't have had they not been willing to make a mistake.
Yeah, it's on the cutting edge. Like I always point out an artist like Miles Davis, who is like the
Yeah,
king of bebop. And
the
bebop is like
best.
a canon in jazz. And then the guy who created that kind of bebop canon goes and creates fusion. And even within jazz to this day, people say, well, that's not real jazz. There are
Hmm.
people that think bebop is like a canon. It's like Shakespeare. It's like that's real jazz. That's the only jazz I really want to teach my kids in college. That the fusion is too experimental. It's not really jazz. But the
Sure.
thing is like sometimes when you're at the bleeding edge, you do something that's uncomfortable to the people in the canon or the
Yeah.
people who create the canon, and they say, "Well, what's that?"
Yeah.
Well, that's because that's where like people who are that creative will push the boundary,
Right.
and when you push the boundary, not everybody's gonna love it.
No.
It's not
Most
for
people won't.
everybody.
Most people won't because they're uncomfortable, and they're not comfortable because they don't trust themselves, because they don't know themselves, because they've never spent a moment living in their purpose, feeling the light of that exploration.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes things they're not for everybody. It's like why you
Hmm.
have a popular song and then you have a critical song. You're like, so
Yeah.
you could be like Bob Dylan and Lou Reed are not everybody's cup of tea.
No.
But the critics will look at those and they'll say these are 5-star records. And you can sit there, so I don't get it. Why is it
Yeah.
5 stars? But it's because when you look at other things that are not so obvious, like they both don't have perfect pitch. They're both more poets than songwriters. They're not
Hmm.
going to sing like Nat King Cole. They're not going to sing like Marvin Gaye. But if you actually look at their words, they're poets. So
Right.
it's actually when you look at the words, and words can have relevance.
Yeah.
But if you actually listen to a song and all you care about is it catchy,
Right.
you don't actually value the words. You
Yeah.
value the catchiness. So that's
Right.
how you judge it. So if that's how you judge music, then you're gonna say, well, those guys are no good.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
and I think it's interesting too, because I mean that's just like what's popular, right? That's just like going with the flow. What's quick, what's easy, what sells, kind of a thing. And
yeah.
I mean, again, we can take those three examples, Howard Hughes, Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates, and we can say, had they gone for the quick fix, we wouldn't have Apple, we wouldn't have, Macintosh, and we wouldn't maybe not be flying airplanes the way that we are now.
Yeah, and music, the revolution of what Dylan did allowed songwriters in the 70s to expand beyond him. And so we got a whole generation of songwriters even to this day that are into depth, right? And that increases the artistic value of the medium by making it more than just about money.
Right.
And so that's where the value sometimes comes in from a different perspective, that it's not always about who's the biggest seller. It's like, do they actually have a cultural impact?
Ooh, yeah. I love that.
And that's in art. That happens all the time. Like, people can have a cultural impact, but they don't make any numbers.
No.
But they actually impact the canon. They get taught in school. People get taught a technique, and like, this, like Orson Welles, in terms of his film technique on Citizen Kane, he didn't know that the camera was limited in its view. And so he came up with these cinematic views that are to this day used as like part of the canon of filmmaking. But when he did it, people said, well, how'd you do that? Well, I didn't know what you couldn't do. So I did what I felt like what I thought it should do. So he wasn't limited by what had been done. He wasn't like trying to stay in some kind of AI algorithm. He's like, if I can see it and I can view it, I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
I don't know it's wrong.
I love that. Yeah.
And that's why I always look at people like that. It's like that's the genius. It's like the Frank Zappas, the Orson Welles, the Dylans, the Hendrixes. Like, and you can those are artists, but I can equate that to the work I do in software.
Absolutely.
It's like people do, if you're doing something that's kind of cutting edge, it's not always like making people happy.
Yeah. Well, you apply it to anything, right? Books, podcasts, anything that you do in life. If you put your secret sauce, like you say, man, oh man, what's possible for you?
So if you're gonna like a time travel and give yourself some advice, what would it be to in terms of like where you had your big epiphany? What would you say to yourself about like things that you could maybe do better or differently?
Yeah. There's a lot. It's a loaded question. It's a hard question. It's a good question. I think there are a lot of situations in my life where they ended poorly because I wasn't trusting myself. And I would go back to a younger version of me and give myself permission to leave rooms before I was forced out of the room. If that makes sense.
Because I think some grace.
Yeah, I think I tried to stay in situations that weren't meant for me longer than I should have, and it was to my detriment as well as the other people who were in the experience with me. And that's like my only regret in life, is that I've tried to force something because this is how it's supposed to be, and you're supposed to show up. And you suck it up and you do it and you keep showing up because you made a commitment. And really, when you know that it's not the right thing for you anymore, I really think that you need to give yourself the permission to walk away before you like hit that really hard roadblock where you're forced to walk away, or there's a huge, outroar of drama or chaos or whatever. I would go back and tell myself to leave the room.
I think that's a really good advice, because I think a lot of people stick it out. Like I was talking about, like surgeons, doctors, lawyers, and they found out like, 10, 15 years into it, and like 5 years into it, they didn't like it. Yeah. But then they said, well, maybe it'll get better. It's like, usually, like if it's not getting better, it's not going to magically somehow get better 10 years from then. No. It's like usually, and it depends on what you want to do in life.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it? Like, people have to, it's like, what is your goal? Right. And some people, they're not clear to themselves about their goal.
Yeah.
they're not clear. It's like, why are you doing it? Is it for the money? Is it for the power? Is it for happiness? Is it for respect?
Yeah.
Like, and then what's the level with all these things? And
Yeah. What's it
would
worth?
you feel better if you did something you felt more respected, or you felt more comfortable, or you felt more like gratified about what you're doing? And
Absolutely.
if you have to be honest about it, it's like, yeah, there are ways that you could actually satisfy those things. And
Yeah.
you don't have to just suck it up like your grandpa and pa said, great grandpa said, "There's oh, just suck it up."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like my grandpa is like working in a mine, going through mine explosions because like that's what I got to do because I'm a miner,
Yeah.
and that's what he felt like he had to do. He didn't feel like he had a choice.
Yeah.
But that's just a different mindset. It's a different place in time.
Yeah. Definitely a different place and time. And I deeply feel for some of our, ancestors and the previous generations, because as limited as some of us might feel who are listening to this conversation, we are the most free. We do have more choice than our ancestors did. And I think it's our responsibility to trust ourselves and take some bold leaps and live more aligned and more in our purpose, because our ancestors couldn't. And so we should take those risks, because, we don't have to go to a mine. We can say, what, this is insane.
I'm not doing
Why would I do this? Right. And we can make those changes. And I think we should.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing because some people are still in the mindset.
Yeah.
You still got families that feel like, well, that's what I should do because grandpa did it and great grandpa did it. And that's like what I
Yeah.
should. Like, do you really? Just because they did it, is that really aligned with where you are? And
Exactly.
people feel like they have an obligation to continue
Yeah.
some lines. And there's a lot of pressure.
It
And
is a
I
lot.
understand that. It's like people might look at that people as like, oh, they're inheriting all this. But then look at all that pressure that's on that.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to be in their shoes. You might think you want to be in their shoes, but
Yeah.
you probably don't.
Well, and I think if you could have those vulnerable conversations with your loved ones, I think when you got down to the bottom of that conversation, I think they would want you to be happy.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, it's like, what are you're gonna wreck your health. You're gonna wreck your quality of living. So what's the point of being on the planet with your quality of living is like zip?
Exactly.
Because you only have so much time. That way, as a
Yeah.
Buddhist, we believe we'll get on the next plane and we'll get to
Yeah.
and we have time to make mistakes because
Yeah.
we'll do it over and again until we learn something.
Exactly.
But some people don't think that way. But it's like it's still an opportunity. It's like
Yes.
you don't have to be locked in. You can always, like, I talk to artists that are like, elderly artists, and they feel like they still have something to say.
Yeah.
That to me is always, this lights up my day when I talk to like a person's like 80, 90, and they still feel like they have something to say. And it was like, there are kids who are 20 that don't think they have something to say.
Yeah.
And it was like, it tells you the perspective of time.
100%. And mindset, it's huge mindset. And I
Yeah.
would say, that 80-year-old knows something that the 20-year-old was never told or taught or has heard before, right? Where they do have something valuable to say. And I think that's our job, the middle generation, to empower people to find your purpose, do your main thing. Like, what is it that you want to be and create and have in this world? And let's help you make it happen.
So what was like your boldest risk? Is just getting into what you're doing today, or is there other risk that you maybe can relate to the audience?
Ooh, I think the boldest risk was to get selfish and choose myself. Yeah. I think that was a pretty bold risk because it really caused a lot of upset. I was a chronic people pleaser. I was a chronic, living for other people and totally not taking care of myself. And when I hit the brakes, it was like everyone around me just was like, well, I don't understand. Like,
What happened?
yeah, they're like, what do you mean you're not coming? What do you mean you're not bringing dinner. What do you mean? What do you mean? And it's
They
like,
were
I
used to
can't.
it.
Yeah, they were totally. I'd spent my whole life making sure everyone was taken care of to my own detriment. And when I stopped, a lot of relationships left. I do
Mhm.
not have the same friend groups. I do not talk to the same people. My family dynamic changed drastically, and that took a long time to kind of navigate and heal. And I would say it's better now than it's ever been. But I think when you choose yourself, that's the boldest thing you could ever do in life, because that's when everything gets to get better. And I look back and I'm so glad that I did it, because the people who are not in my life anymore aren't people I would want to be around.
Yeah, with their alignment. Like a lot of times it's like you have people around you and it might be just because you're in proximity or you're in these kind of codependencies
Yes.
or toxicity.
Yep.
And once you get healed, like I'm a cancer survivor and there were people around me before my cancer diagnosis. And then there were some people that just, because I was 27 when I had it, and some people could not deal
Yeah.
with the mortality of their friend age 27 getting like a sarcoma. And I
Wow.
and I came to understand is like some people that's so heavy they just don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
some of those, and then some people I didn't expect actually around. So I
Interesting.
come to sometimes it's like a law of attraction. The people who are on your frequency, like once you really know where you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
then you have alignment
Yeah.
where you're like in the music, you're in tune. So
Yes,
you say
exactly.
sometimes you can be out of tune. You
Yeah.
can be in like that discordant state, and then things aren't coming together. It's like everything's like coming out noise. Things aren't aligning. I'm not getting opportunities because you're not in the right frequency. But once you're in tune, then people tend to come around because it's pleasing, or it feels like, oh, it's comfortable or it's safe for people to be around you,
Yeah.
or there's opportunities around you.
Yep.
So people feel like, whoa, if I'm around this person, I feel like I'm on a growth curve.
Yeah.
Well, who
Yeah.
wouldn't want to be like in that situation rather than on the downward spiral?
Yeah. I choose up. I choose up, man.
Yeah, that's a hard thing because some people feel like in the arts, they're like, oh, we got to be around the edgy on the down. Like,
Yeah.
but being on the down sometimes doesn't get you anywhere.
No.
Right. So it's it's like it's not hip to just be like depressed all day.
No,
Yeah.
it's not.
And so like it can be a place that you can have a cathartic exercise in your art. But
Yes.
you shouldn't put yourself in that place to create your art, thinking that's the only way you can create art, which is a
Correct.
mistake that sometimes artists make
Yeah.
because then it puts them in a bad place overall. You got to remember your pillars,
Yep.
like your mental health and your heart and your soul and your body. If
Yep.
those things are out of alignment, it's not going to work out.
No. No, and that's, and that's the thing is, people always come to me, and because I love business, I'm good at business, I like to teach strategy, um, and they say, well, my business isn't working, and I'm like, okay, how do you feel? Because it's a direct reflection of how you feel, what's happening in your life, in your business, in your relationships. That is the direct connection to your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And so
Hmm.
if you are not seeing what you want in your life, it's probably because you're ignoring one of those areas.
Yeah, so your foundational pillars, like
Yep.
people forget about nutrition, they forget about their health, they forget about the mental health.
Yep.
So I ran into a guy that was a coach, and he had six pack abs, looked like a total physical specimen, but he said mentally he didn't see himself that way. So
Mm.
he was like his business wasn't working well because he wasn't actually seeing what other people saw.
Yep.
He saw when he looked in the looking glass, he didn't see the guy with six pack abs. So he had to work on that. Once he got in alignment, then his business aligned because he needed to align. But it was like just thinking because he had the physical six pack abs and looked good
Right.
doesn't mean that you actually are there. Sometimes you
Yep.
have to look at the other things. Well, you
Yep.
always have to look at the other things.
Always, always. I mean, a lot of millionaires, a lot of multimillionaires, a lot of billionaires are not happy people, And it's because they went for the money, they got that success, and the other areas are now suffering.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to actually, have that looking glass moment and be
Yeah.
honest. Like you said, like the people think, well, that's selfish. Oh, that's me being too, like I'm being too uppity in myself. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
this guy's always on this trip. Like it's like, well, why is he so dynamic? Why is he able to go on stage? Why is he able to do that presentation? Why are they able to do that? Well, stop thinking about why he can do it and think about like how you could do it,
Yeah.
within yourself, and
Yep.
not just run into the comparison trap.
Yep.
Then you
Exactly.
get resentment. We start resenting other people's success instead of like, you're going to spend all your energy being a hater. Are you going to take your energy and actually try to do something?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's always difficult because it's like, I don't mind constructive criticism. I work with editors. I work with, people, focus groups, all kinds. You want feedback, but it's like somebody just saying, I hate it, is not very constructive. When somebody
No.
comes back and tells me like very detailed
Here's
why
why.
something, yeah, then I'm like, okay, fine. You show me like where and why and how. But if you just say, oh, I hated it, well, what value is that?
None.
Like, you spend the energy just going around saying you hate everything without giving anybody any solutions.
Right.
You have to at least point out like, what is your alternative?
Yeah. What are you hoping to see?
Yeah, and even then, you take it or you leave it. But it's like, it's good to be open
Yeah.
to, that level of critique, which
Definitely.
is hurtful to every artist would admit. There's like somebody, they think they got the best thing, and then they get this response of like, that's not kicking,
Yeah.
and you're like, I thought it was the best thing, but did you spend some time tweaking it? And you're like, okay, but yeah, it's like that's why you have to kind of put things in the world so you don't have a tunnel vision, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And there's always more. There's always more to learn. I mean, the growth, it doesn't stop, like you said.
So, what kind of guilty pleasures do you have that maybe people wouldn't expect that you have?
Ooh, I love champagne. I love a good glass of champagne. Yeah, it's funny. I actually fell in love with champagne while on my first 10-day Vipassana retreat.
Hmm.
Um, and the whole time, I had this really good friend. She's a winemaker. She has a very successful winery here in Oregon, and she always was drinking champagne. And I'm just like, you're crazy. You're weird. I don't understand it. So I'm at this silent meditation retreat, and I literally got out of it. A couple days later, she calls me. She's like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "I'm ready to have champagne with you." And she's like, "What? I've been trying to get you to drink with me for years, and you never do it." And I was like, I'm ready to do it. So my guilty pleasure is definitely a delicious glass or bottle of champagne, whatever is available.
That's cool. But it's good to
Yeah,
have something that kind of puts you at ease. Puts you in a place that's like everybody has the thing they,
everybody's got a vice.
like I like my Maine lobster. 'Cause I'm a New Englander. I
Yeah.
can't have that every day, but it's like if I can go to Cook's Lobster House, like right in Maine, go right to where they bring it in, and to sit
Mm.
there and get like a 2 pounder with like, all the fresh veggies because they make it themselves. They got their own garden. It's
Oh
like, yeah,
yeah.
that to me, better than going to New York. Though I mean, I like going to New York, but it's like there's something about being like in the lobsterman's
Ooh
backyard
yeah.
and actually having a restaurant, like, and you see the boats coming in, and
Oh my
like
gosh.
that's fresh. That's it. That's the
I'm
real deal.
in. I'm in. When are we going? I'm in. I'm in. I'm sold.
Yeah, that's like the best place.
That
Even like
sounds
I'm
amazing.
always pushing them, but it's like I found it when I went to college in Maine. And I'm like, my professor brought me there, and I was like, oh, and I bring my family there. Like for
Oh
vacations, we go
wow.
to Algonquin and then we go hang out there. But yeah, it's just I like that. I'm a New Englander. I like hanging in the pines.
Yeah.
But yeah, just having something that like you can have an event
Yep.
to give you something that's like special in this world to you.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of share it. Like you having the champagne with your friend is like
Yeah.
having it with a friend is like that's the moment, right?
That's the
That's what,
moment.
yeah,
Yep.
that's what you want. It's like being around people. We've been talking about like people power,
Yep.
humanity. That's what you want to do. So if people come to carissadean.com and you have that welcome dash home, is that how they connect with you to try to get into your whole methodology of how you like to help people?
Yeah, my website has I have a blog on there, so I write monthly blog posts. They can sign up for my newsletter, which I send out weekly newsletters. They can tap into my podcast, which is Critical Conversations. They can book a call with me if they want to connect and see if they want to work with me. Lots of free resources available, because I think there's a stigma in the coaching world that you have to be spending a lot of money to receive good coaching. And I don't think that's true. I think coaching is the thing that changed my life and helped me get into my purpose. I always say that I didn't choose coaching. Coaching chose me. It's my purpose. It's what I'm meant to do in this life. It lights me up. It gives me a lot of energy. And so I really want people to understand that change is possible, and it doesn't have to be very expensive or super time consuming, but that it can be sustainable and effective and approachable.
I think that's a good message, because you want to be able to let people know. And some people think you can't be a musician unless you got a Steinway piano,
Yeah.
got like $10,000 guitar, and like you don't always have to have the most expensive instrument,
Right.
to actually carry the message, right?
Yep.
And so it's the same idea. Like they don't have to have the most expensive course.
Right.
That if something speaks to you, it speaks to you, and it's not always about the monetary. But we live in a capitalist society, so everything's like,
I know.
oh, the $10,000 watch has got to be better than the Swatch.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not, because like I like the Swatch.
Yeah. Yeah. It works
That's what
for
I
me.
like. It's like I don't need it. I don't need that. So
and you're not in credit card debt for it. Like,
yeah,
wow,
so like,
amazing.
what am I trying to do? It just like it doesn't. Like, well, I'm trying to get in this club, so they got to see that I got it. So okay, well, that's what you're trying to do. I know why you want your accoutrements, but like you don't really need it.
Right.
I don't need to be in that club either.
Probably not. Yeah.
But I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Liquor Coach podcast. It always goes by quicker than we ever imagined, but appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today. We were just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We will be on all the other podcast platforms where you can watch or listen to a podcast. And again, thank you for being a guest and spreading your knowledge today. That's what we love to, we talk to people, all the time, to hear their voice.
Thank you, Phantom. Appreciate being here.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
You too.